What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Kinda Different, a podcast where we talk about innovation in dental care. We connect with some of the best people in the industry, people that you absolutely should know if you already don't. And we talk about how we all together can make dental care more human. If you've been with us for one episode or for the almost 60 that we have recorded now, I think that you're probably finding that we're unpacking some of the things that are coming up in dentistry right now in terms of how do we make this industry kind of continue to move forward in a very fluctuant time. So super excited that you're joining us today. I am Dr. Matt Allen, the CEO and co-founder of DifferentKind, your host for Kinda Different. And I'm super thrilled today to be joined by someone who I've recently met, but someone who comes highly recommended by someone who's been on the podcast before. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit today. But Thomas Passalacqua, who, been around dentistry for a long time, now an executive coach and founder at Ascend Professional Pathways, and somebody who I think really kind of jives with the whole worldview that we have over here at DifferentKind, or at least, we recognize each other, right, in terms of how we think about those things. So Thomas, thanks so much for joining today. Tell us a little bit more about you, and then we'll dive into it.
Yeah, Matt, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and fantastic work on the podcast and everything you're doing. It's really exciting stuff, and such an exciting time in dentistry. I'm in dental now 9 years, and prior to being in dental, I started my career as a teacher. So I have a master's in ed. I taught in New York City for 8 years, and I was a successful educator. But I felt like I wanted to explore other avenues, and then I got into dental sales. Did fairly well there, started to train and mentor other sales reps. And then I got into the DSO space, and I've been there for a few years as well. But there's been one thing that's always been pulling at me internally, was getting back to my roots as an educator, but really helping others and seeing others do well in their own ambitions. So a couple years back, I decided to embark on the journey of getting certified as an executive coach. That jived really well with my education background and my skills as, a communicator and someone who really sees myself enabling the success of others.
Hmm.
And I put together the business of Ascend Professional Pathways. And it's really, my mission is to bolster and empower other professionals. And that could be navigating their challenges, fulfilling their missions and fulfilling their potential, and just better reaching their goals. But I'm doing that within the dental space because that's where my network is. That's where my passion is. It's where I have most relevant connections and industry knowledge. So over the last number of months, I've been working with a lot of dental professionals, DSO professionals, both clinical and support staff and corporate staff, really of helping them find the clarity to better hit their goals and their ambitions. And it's been received really, really well. And it aligns really well with what you're doing with DifferentKind and kind of really focusing on the person aspect of the industry.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, excited to jump in. I think the most obvious place to start here is specifically around coaching,
Yep.
right? And I have an 11-year-old son. I have been a coach of his competitive soccer team now for the last year, and it's been fun to like really dive into that and kind of create the culture that we wanted to create, which was maybe not what we wanted before, right? And it's like, how do we build that, and how do we help this team, and all of that stuff. And I think we all have this idea of coaching in our brain because we probably either played an instrument or been on a team or something like that. And at some point that kind of goes away, right? Like we kind of feel like, okay, coaching is no longer for me. And that's obviously not true. I think for all of us. And maybe some of us call that coach a therapist, or maybe some of us, whatever it might be. But why does coaching feel innovative to you as we think about innovation in the dental industry? And how do you feel like it sets people up to kind of really be at the front end of like, hey, let's push things here that need to be pushed. Let's like lead in ways that need to be lead. Just walk me through a little bit of kind of your philosophy there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think it's really relevant because I often do get that question of what really is coaching and how is it different from other modes of support and how is it innovative, right? So the philosophy and approach of executive coaching is kind of a really unique approach to helping someone in their own journey. So the way I approach coaching is I'm not a mentor, I am not a consultant, I'm not advising you, I am not a therapist. It's really a mode of communication and a mode of shifting your perspective. So if you go through the coaching process, it's me very intensely listening to what you're describing, what your
Mhm.
experiences are, and I'm helping you navigate the immediate kind of blinders you might have on,
Hmm.
or the perspective you might be, uh, you know, perceiving things at the moment, or your assumptions or your emotions. And it's me kind of being a sounding board and this mirror to, all right, here's what I am hearing and seeing you describe to me in your current moment.
Yep.
And let me challenge that to you. And like, let's look at like facts, reality, all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's not me dictating, oh, here's my opinion, or here's what I think you should or shouldn't be doing, or hey, why do you think that is? And dive into the past. It's really a future forward process.
Mm.
Within minutes, in most of the situations I'm working with, someone is really discovering solutions and strategy and clarity as they're talking through it. I mean, it is a very therapeutic process, but it's not, the intention is to focus on future action. So it's innovative because it's really empowering the person to be the most valuable resource in any system,
Totally.
right? Like dentistry is amazing right now because there's so much innovation in tech and in services. I mean, the DSO space is just booming with streamlining processes and everything. I mean, not just, I mean, on the back end, front end, clinical,
Everywhere.
everything. It's really amazing to see each year the advancements. But the innovation with the individual needs to be at the forefront too, because it's how are you navigating all of that change and the stress and the overwhelm and just the complete like stimulation of opportunities, challenges, doubts. There's a lot of that. So it's really, I am just narrowing in on the person,
Yeah.
empowering the person to utilize the skills and the resources they have to be successful in whatever they want to be successful in. So it,
Totally.
it can apply in a lot of different spaces here.
Yeah, no, for sure. It feels like, I mean, I think about it. I literally like, we got some game film back last night from a recent game, we're watching and, you watch a kid, right? Like in playing soccer and it's like, let's pause right here. Like what options do you have? Like where could the ball go? Like why would you choose that option versus this option, right? And, you know, building those reflex muscles into people, right? To say like in the moment, you do have those blinders on. You're like, I didn't see that guy there, or I
Mm.
didn't see that defender. I didn't feel this, right? Like, and the more that you exercise those muscles, it feels like it gives people the opportunity to be better at realizing it in real time, right? So they are able to see that kind of stuff, but B, then also to, like instead of you kind of having to bring them back to that moment all the time for them to, even if they don't realize it in the moment, to like make a quick debrief after, like, what went well? What could I do better? Right. Like, and build that muscle in folks, right? So that it's like, hey, cool. Like we're always aware. And I think that to me, what I'm hearing from you in terms of, kind of thinking about the humanity of this, right, is that we can't really be our best selves if we're not even aware of what we
Yeah.
want, how we're thinking about it, like what we're doing, how we're acting, right? And once we start to really uncover all of that, we can be a much more, self-actualized, intentional probably version of ourself, in an arena where we really do have a lot of different competing priorities, whether that's, PE, whether that's, just the growth of the owner desire, whether you're whatever part of the team you are, right? There's a lot of different competing priorities. And so it's like, if you can scan the landscape and really feel all those at the right time, like you can be a really incredible asset to someone who has like an emotional and strategic and, kind of just bigger sense of the pulse of like, what do I need to do in this situation, both to help drive things forward for myself, but also for everyone, right?
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of really good points there. A couple of things that come to mind is like you said, building that reflex, right?
Mm,
I think it's building that confidence and competence that you are capable in your role or as part of the team. And a lot of it that I see is like there's a ton of self-doubt out there. I mean, I
mm,
think just in this day and age, social media, just tech, everything. I mean, challenges in every corner of the world, right? Like, there's plenty of resistance wherever you want to look. It's really looking inwards and saying, okay, what am I good at? What are my strengths? But also practicing that, like
mm,
practicing self-reflection
yeah.
is an amazing skill. Taking the time and the space, right? So it's also intentionally slowing down and thinking, okay, what is most important in the moment? Almost like reprioritizing priorities throughout the day, because there's endless distractions, good and challenging, but it is taking that intentional time and space to refocus, flexing that muscle of what's going to move the needle, what's my priority at the moment, How am I helping our overall mission? And kind of reframing what that mission is. And the way I approach it is how are your short term actions supporting your long term goals? And that could be within the practice or within your own personal goals or the goals of a team, right? What have you. How does everything you do, your decisions, your actions, your behaviors support the overall ambition you have? And
Yeah.
it's taking time to define what those ambitions are, being self-reflective. And that's where coaching comes in because it's empowering that individual to kind of be that barometer. It's
Yeah.
not waiting for someone else to say, oh, Tom, here's what you need to do, or here's what you're doing great at. It's building that muscle and that
Yeah.
confidence that you can be that own barometer for yourself.
Yeah.
But it's a process and it's a skill that you have to develop.
Totally. Well, it's interesting. Like I've been thinking about this recently. Obviously the frontier tech right now is all the generative AI stuff, right? And it's everywhere. And it's interesting because like, I use it all the time in a lot of things, but I try to, have it be obviously as right as possible. And, it's like, cool. Like, so you use the thinking model versus the regular model. And it takes a minute, right? Where you're like, it's not giving me an immediate answer. And I think that's just an interesting analog for us, right? Where sometimes we always, that's a terrible sentence. We feel like we have to give this answer immediately to the questions that come our way instead of saying, wow, let me think about that for a minute, or, whatever it might be, right? And just that ability to not only debrief after the process, but to kind of say, okay, cool, like I can process through some of this in real time to be the best version of myself. I don't know. It feels like that kind of almost like self-coaching. Like good coaches teach you how to like understand more, right? So that you can make the
Yeah,
decisions on your own. They're not just shouting instructions from the sideline. And that's where it feels like, man, the best players, the best, whatever it might be, the best people, right, come from people who have like learned and kind of developed that muscle.
absolutely. It's that confidence in their own abilities. It's also that self-reflection piece, reassuring yourself that you are
Totally.
capable and you can reassure yourself you have the skills and abilities to execute it your best ability. Yeah.
Totally. Love it. Well, let's like kind of dive into your background a little bit more because I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of interesting threads to pull on there in terms of kind of this, educational background, right? And I think in general, like thinking about pedagogy and how we learn and, those kinds of things are really interesting. Tell us a little bit more about how that educational background really informs how you just think about the world, how you see the world, not just like what you do in your job, but like how you really kind of process things. And, what is that background given you that other people might not have?
Yeah, very very interesting question. So being an effective teacher really laid a really great platform for me in my career because I mean, I taught in very difficult situations throughout New York City. I mean, you can imagine classrooms full of middle school kids. And it's a fact of being relatable and relevant, and also relinquishing the fact that I am not the most important person. I mean, in a safety sense, yes, in a classroom, but I have to be meaningful to my audience,
Mm,
communicating in a way that engages them and getting them invested in whatever situation I want them invested in. So that could be a classroom of kids, that could be a room full of dentists, that could be a C-suite, at a boardroom, right? It's being relatable, being meaningful. What's everyone's purpose? How do I align everyone together? And if
yeah.
you can conduct that energy, you really have the ability to kind of go a direction and have everyone follow that. So that skill set comes a little more naturally to me than it might
Mm,
to others, right? So I
yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
And that's really at the forefront of my coaching. It's
Mm,
it's not about me. It's using my skills to help someone build that confidence, build that clarity, flex that muscle of self-reflection, looking internally for the resources and skills you have, especially in this day and age when there is so much innovation and so much advancement, you can get drowned in distraction and overwhelm so quickly. And we then assume I'm not adequate or I am lacking in XYZ, or hey, I can just go online and ask AI now to get the answer. We're almost like giving up our abilities as people and our innate abilities as humans to navigate the space we're in. So I'm kind of flipping it and going, no, we got to focus more on why we are different than all the other tech innovation out there and all the other advancements and everything. Like we have more resources and we are more capable than we think.
Yeah.
And let me bring that out of you. So
Yeah.
yeah, that comes back from being a teacher and engaging with the audience, and that's what I'm really passionate in seeing. And it's amazing when you go through the process and people respond to it and
Mm.
it's reciprocated and they're like, wow, that's actually really true and it works. And I see the results and I see how someone is starting to trust themselves a little bit more.
Yeah. So an interesting thing that I see in your career journey, we've only met once, but and here we are talking about it live on the podcast, right? But is the kind of the empathetic worldview that you have right there, which I think is, in the classroom, how do we, kind of tap into everyone? How do we help everyone feel heard? How do we like bring those skills out, right? And then obviously kind of go into sales, right? And the best salespeople, right, are not about themselves and just trying to push something on someone. They're trying to understand, right, who that person is, what they want, how to, how does this thing help them or not, right? And good salespeople don't want to sell a product to someone that doesn't need it, right? Because they're like, this is not going to help you. And that's a very empathetic, worldview, right? And I think that then, coming into this as well, right, that kind of core thread of empathy, and kind of others focusedness, let's say, is something that I really see there, which I think is interesting. And wondering if you have any kind of, you know, I think the evidence around empathy is really interesting from the perspective of, yes, certain people have it more, right? Like that is just a true thing of like your baseline might be different than someone else's. And we know from research on the Buddhist monks in terms of like watching them operate a certain way over the years that you can become a more empathetic person and you can train in that, and it's a skill as well, right? And so how do you think about kind of imparting that worldview into the people that you're working with, whether that's, managing other sales leaders, whether that's kind of being a part of a classroom, like whether that's coaching? How do you kind of think about taking this, like, hey, this is very Thomas and it just comes naturally to me, and I want to help others develop the skill as well?
Yeah, empathy is such a unique idea to develop, right? And yes, it can be developed and practiced, but I think you have to be really intentional. I think it comes down to questions like, okay, what do we really want to accomplish, both
Right.
as individuals, as a community, and this can go as you know narrow, within your role in industry and career, or as broad as like people in general and the whole collective, right? And I think if we start looking at the community as we all need to contribute to bolster that empathy that empathy. If we look at the community of what we have to bolster and develop, it's that empathy piece that is really strong. So I'm always looking at it through the lens of how does this help the collective? How does this help
Mm.
everyone else? Your coworkers, your
Yeah.
patients, your staff members, your leadership, your community in general, the population in general. How does your individual actions and individual intention help support the collective good?
Yeah.
And I think that's just a very healthy way to approach things because if you want to be divided, that's easy to do, right? Like
Yeah. Totally.
you don't have to look far to do that. But if you want to actually move the needle in a more positive direction, it does take a little bit of intention and work and purpose. So practicing that, but also threading that through, okay, what's my role? Yes, my daily job,
Yeah.
but also my role as a person, and
Mm.
bringing it back to the human element is really important there.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I think you were just mentioning too in your previous answer that I think ties together really well with this in terms of innovation and how do we, make things more human and whatever, right? Is the idea too that I think we're coming back to in this age of all this technological advancement of your superpower can be your ability to be with others in
Mm.
a, in an in-person way, right? I think we're seeing some of that come back, especially in the post-COVID world, right? Where it's like, no, like in-person events, small in-person events where you can meaningfully connect with people. It's not a 50,000 person conference. It's 100 people in a room, and, you're meaningfully connecting with some people and you're driving things forward. And so whether that's like, an company meeting or, whatever it might be, right? Like how you speak at that, how you show up, how people look into your eyes and feel that empathy, can be a really meaningful differentiator for somebody who is looking to continue in their career and, just be the best person that they can be in general too, right? So I think that's an interesting idea for me, in terms of like, well, we've always known that, right? In lots of ways. and the best ideas are often not new at all. But it feels like it's been forgotten in some ways, especially with like this like rush to technology. That how you show up with other people in person and how you show people care, compassion, consideration, empathy, whatever it might be, right, is a meaningful thing that not everyone has.
Yeah. I would just pay attention to how you feel. What reactions do you get internally when you're speaking and interacting with people live or, through webinar versus being by yourself behind a screen, running the AI prompts, what have you, right? Like, where do you feel most connected, most heard, most
Totally.
reassured, most impactful? All of that meaning, it does come from that in-person connection. It reassures like, yeah, we are a social species, right? So that is part of it.
Yeah.
It also brings meaning to it. And it also shines the light of, okay, we are more than just our outputs
Mhm.
in whatever role we're in or whatever situation we're in. Like you have to build in that interaction piece because that's really what reflects internally is okay, that's meaningful to me. Right. When
Yeah.
you meet somebody in person, and you walk away, it's like, oh, I have a new connection now, like and it's not just a connection as far as like, oh, I connected with somebody, but like, no, you have there's an interaction there that you can't get artificially. So
Totally.
yeah. And I think with the rise of tech also puts that amplifies that aspect too. I don't think they're distant. I think the more advancement we get, we're going to get more reassurance that, okay, we have to do this as a group of people together
Yeah.
because dividing us into individuals in silos is not healthy,
Yeah.
right? For the collective, the community, and us individually. So the rise in tech has to enable the community to get together and again bring our intentions forward of what's the true purpose here? Why do we have all these technological advances? What's the purpose of it all? If it's making things easier, better access, streamline processes, and all of that, better communication. Well, what's the end result? And that should be bringing people together.
Yeah. Love that, man. All right. So as we think about making dental care more human, I think, you know, the there's lots of ways that we can kind of, think about kind of tying together a lot of what we've talked about thus far. But I want to bring it at one more different piece because I think you'll probably have an interesting perspective on it, right? There's a
Mhm.
book called 10 to 25, which is about like the brain development of kids from 10 to 25,
Sure.
essentially. And there's, the current hypothesis, I think, when you would ask most people is like, their frontal lobe is just not developed, right? And they're just idiots, right? And then we treat them like idiots. And then they play into that, right? And there's this researcher from Stanford who's essentially done a lot of research around that and is like, no, they just have different needs essentially in their brain. They're not, yes, their frontal lobe is not developed, but that doesn't mean that they're idiots. They just have different needs, which is generally like respect and like, social kind of like, affirmation and those kinds of things. And we often don't give teenagers, especially those things, right? We don't give them respect. We don't give them the ability to seek that social affirmation is something they need. Not the point. Interesting book for anyone who might want to read it. But what he talks about it then in terms of how we essentially coach these folks, right? Because they're not in the realm anymore of like, you can't discipline a 17-year-old if you've never disciplined, your kid before that, right? Like you're in coaching mode now. Like you've got to help them learn how to make their own decisions or they're not going to become a self-actualized human. And so this idea of like high support, but high expectation, right? Like I'm going to expect a lot out of you, but I'm also going to give you high kind of support to get there. I think is a really interesting perspective that I think often in business and maybe in healthcare, some of those things that we like don't give people, like it's either, yeah, we give them high support, but we don't have high expectations of them.
Right.
Or, we have super high expectations, but we leave them to do it on themselves, which just often feel like, okay, you're just kind of left to your own devices and you can't actually figure it out. Right. So it feels like what you're saying in a lot of ways in terms of how do we develop leaders, especially in this kind of DSO space, right? It's like, how do we give people high support and maintain high expectations and do that really well? So just want to A, get your perspective on that, but then
Mhm.
B, maybe there's like an example of somebody that you've worked with or someone that you've talked with or, something where you're like, hey, this is like what that kind of structure has led to and what the output of that was. So I'll pause there. You can react.
Yeah. Really interesting. Right. Especially when you're looking at, kids and development and the human experience there. I think it could be either a lack or a need for experience, right? And almost learning through experience. Because in this day and age, we're almost programmed to expect the answers right away.
Mm,
Like if we have a problem,
mm,
just look it up and there it is. we're
Yeah.
almost diluting our skill to learn through experience, which
Mm.
for that adolescent is kind of the necessary. You have to go through the learning process through experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think to tie that together is it's like, okay, what experiences are you getting to learn your role, to learn your skills
Mm.
versus just getting all the information as a download, right? Like,
Yeah.
is there a manual for everything? Or is like, if you're going to be a leader, you have to kind of have your successes, have your challenges, have your
Yeah.
failures, learn from experience, because that's prior to this, modern day and age, that's how you learned, right? Like
Hmm.
through
Hmm.
that trial and error phase. So I think it's probably going back to that a little bit. And then once you have that that mileage under you of like, okay, I've tried and failed or I succeeded, then you have those expectations of, okay, now you're leading from experience.
Hmm.
Here's how you can level up your expectations. But if you just expect someone to just, oh, here's the information, go lead without that experience factor, it might not translate as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like it kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, right? I mean, I could continue to think about this from a soccer perspective, but it's like pause game, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are your options, right? And I think good coaching, right? Like what you're talking about with these folks is like, how do you see those options? And sometimes it takes choosing the wrong one to realize what the right one is, or it takes realizing like, I do have a blind spot there and I need someone to help me like continue to see it, right? And a good coach is not going to tell you like just pass it here, right? The good coach is going to help you figure out how do you, scan more quickly so that that blind spot is not, whatever it might be. We don't have to go too down the like soccer hole of, how do we talk about soccer tactics on this podcast, but it does feel like good coaching in general, right? Like helps good. I would say my thought here would be that a good coach, whether that's whoever your boss is, like someone like you that's coming in from the outside, whatever it is, right? Like any good leader, let's say, maybe not just a coach, but a good leader is not just going to give you the info, it's not just going to give you the download, but they're going to help you to like, hey, we need you to live this experience in some ways with some guardrails, obviously, sometimes if it's a hugely crucial decision for the company or whatever. But like, when is the appropriate time? So like, let people fail, or let them make their own decision and see how it
Yeah.
goes. And that just to me feels like, man, like all of the best coaches that I've ever had felt like that's what they were trying to pull out of me.
Yeah. No, it's a really cool analogy too, because you're almost letting them fail in a safe and healthy situation, right? There is a safety net. Like, okay, yes, you're learning through experience. There is some room for error, if you will. That's going to sharpen your skills over the long run, build the confidence and your competency because you're actually living through it versus just telling me and then either I do well or not, and then now what? I have no internal barometer there. So, yes, my approach to coaching is giving someone the space to do that exploration, navigate their choices, navigate successes, failures. What's the lesson learned from everything? How do you consistently get better? Building that internal reflection muscle and also realizing you need to have that intentional space and time to do that analysis, right? Like, how often are you pausing that game to take a look at everything, or are you just on to the next, to the next, to the next? And then you never really build that skill. You
Yeah.
never really have the time to learn from the experience because you're always just playing catch up.
Yep.
So part of the coaching process really is slowing things down as much as you can just for a moment,
Yep.
because you'll be amazed of how much you can learn from, that free shot. So yeah, I think it's a really applicable, analogy that you're putting there. So
Yeah, just a way for me to shoehorn soccer into my my daily life. So,
yeah, yeah,
um, awesome, man. Well, I think that's a great way to kind of close up in terms of what you're saying there of how you coach and whatnot. So, if people want to get in touch with you, right, if they want to learn more, if they're like, hey, it actually sounds like that could be something that I would be interested in. Where can people get in touch with you? Tell us a little bit more about that.
yeah, cool. So if you're just curious about the coaching process in general and like what this executive coaching really is, or at least my approach on it,
Mm.
know that it's really a client centered process where my whole intention is like empowering your success. And that's where I'm utilizing all my skills over the years to be that best listener, to challenge your perceptions, to really get you to pause and think versus me telling you what I think you should or shouldn't be doing, right? So just know that. But if you want to learn more, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So just look me up on LinkedIn. I'm sure you have my link in the show
Mhm.
notes and everything. Message me there. I'm really responsive. My website is ascendpropathways.com. You can get my email through there. There's a message board through there. There's plenty of articles, free tools, resources. I spent a lot of time building out a lot of content to help our industry and help those who feel like they just need to get a little bit more clarity and a better strategy of how do I get ahead of all this craziness in the world, and how do I really align my intentions with my actions. So I'm happy to chat with anybody. My whole passion is helping other people. So please reach out to me.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks so much for diving into, your background and, dealing with my crazy analogies and, whatever. It's been a great conversation. We really
Yeah,
appreciated it and definitely look forward to continuing it in the future.
yeah. No, today was great. We got a little deep, and I think we made a lot of really cool analogies. So Matt, thank you so much for the time. It was a pleasure.